What's up, everybody? With all of these BIS lists floating around, I wanted to take a second to talk about what a realistic BIS setup could look like for next phase. This is actually going to be the set that I'm going for next phase because as nice as the BIS list is, it can be really unrealistic with how fast this phase might go. We expect it's going to be shorter, and with how limited tier specifically, and just like a lot of the loot is. If you wipe one time in the raid, well, guess what? You're not getting a 272 cloak. If you wipe 5 times or more, you're only going to get 2 pieces of 258 tier from the chest at the end. So there's a lot of things that can get in the way of you getting your BIS setup. So let's talk about a setup that's actually really close and seems very close, and can move some pieces around so that you might have a budget setup, but you're not having budget DPS at all. All right, so what I have in front of me is actually the best alliance setup, and I'll talk about Horde right after this, so don't worry, Horde. I'm going to have something for you as well. But this is the BIS setup for Alliance Shadowpriest that won the sim competition from the Shadowpriest Discord. Now, the DPS is going to be a little bit different just because my settings are different, but doesn't really change anything. Now, first of all, the one thing I do want to say, if you're not aware, is that our pre-pot now is pretty much Potion of Speed across the board. So Potion of Wild Magic falls off as fights get shorter, and even with longer fights, as our gear increases, we benefit more from haste than we do from Wild Magic. So just to prove this, so this was a sim using Wild Magic, using haste as the pre-pot. Let's change it to Wild Magic. Now, it's not a huge difference. It's really not. So if you have a bunch of Wild Magic, then use them. You're not going to lose it that much damage, but as the fights get shorter, haste becomes better. So right now this is a 3-minute fight, but like if you're killing bosses really quickly, Thorum can be like a minute and a half right now. So fights in TOGC are going to start out longer, but as you get more gear, they're going to get a lot faster. So that's something to keep in mind about haste potions. Okay, so let's go back. I'm going to resim this just so that we have a fresh DPS number here that I can use as a reference. All right, so 11,360. Now, this is the BIS setup. Let's talk about what my budget setup is going to be. I'm going to run a quick sim, and then I'll talk about the DPS. You can see it's actually simming higher. Now, I think that's just variance. I'm only doing 3,000 iterations, but this is very comparable to a BIS setup. I'm not saying it's better. I think this was just variance. Let's just sim it again to see. Yeah, so that was just like a very lucky sim roll, but here within 2 DPS. So this is a very good set. Now, what are we doing here? Well, first of all, we only have 2 pieces of 258 tier. So we have the chest and we have the legs. Number 2 is that the other tier pieces are tier 8. So we have the shoulders and we have the helm. That's because our tier 8 2-piece bonus is actually really strong. So that's the 15% damage to Devouring Plague. So those are our 4 tier slots. We're still using Pharaoh's Gloves. So hopefully you have those already or can get them in next phase. Now, what's different from our BIS setup outside of the tier? Well, we lack a lot of hit because the tier 9 helm gives us hit, but obviously we're not using that. So we need to make up for that using Boots of the Icy Flow. Now, I really like this item because guess what? It's not BIS for any other caster. It should be extremely uncontested, and that makes it really easy for us to grab instead of Boots of the Morning Widow. So these normally would be in our BIS setup, but it's also in every other caster's BIS setup. So by swapping off of Boots of the Morning Widow onto Boots of the Icy Flow, it just makes it that much easier for us to get these boots. So again, the whole point here is we're getting gear easier, but we're also maintaining the same DPS. So that's one swap. Another swap is we're using Petrified Ivy Sprig because again, we need more hit. So we don't even have to try to get, if I go back to the BIS setup, Rod of Imprisoned Souls from 10-man Heroic. We just don't really care about it anymore because we need the extra hit. Now, one item that it does mean we do have to get is Band of Deplorable Violence instead of using Nebula Band as our second ring. Now, the DPS delta between these two isn't huge, but I would say it is still enough that you want to get Deplorable Violence. So let's give a quick sim with Nebula Band so you can see, it's still close within 20 DPS. So it's not that bad. This is probably like one of the lower priority items for sure, but most people for Deplorable Violence pretty much get like a 20 to 30 DPS upgrade for range DPS. I'm pretty sure I might be forgetting about like Boomkins if they get something special there, but it's not that great of a rank for anybody, which means it shouldn't be too hard to get. I don't think many people would prioritize this too highly, and I would also say you probably shouldn't either. So there's that. Outside of those items, this is still very much like BIS. So Court of Tenebrous Mist is going to be contested. Armbands of the Ashen Saint are going to be contested. If you wanted to, you could try to move things around a little bit more if there's like an item that you know isn't super contested, but that's gonna lower your DPS further. This is like the most budget set that also maintains really good, basically comparable to BIS DPS. Now, what if you're Horde? Let's go to the Horde set, and I'm going to swap to a troll. Now, you might not be a troll, which is perfectly fine. I don't think it's really going to change much. Like the racial's good. I think it'll just change like the absolute DPS numbers we see here, but it's not going to change the relative DPS. So like how much better one set is than the other. So I don't think that's going to change whether you're undead, troll, whatever it might be. So now this is again the best, or the BIS setup, the one that won the sim competition for the Shadowpriest Discord at 11,495 DPS. Now let's go to my double 2-piece set. So very similar to the one I just showed you for Alliance. Now when we sim this, again, we can see it actually went higher for a little second. It's within 3 DPS. It's very comparable. It's pretty much the exact same DPS. Yes, there's a little bit of nuance and it's not quite the same, but it's pretty much the same. Now let's see, again, double 2-piece going for the chest pants combination for tier 9 at a 258 item level, and same thing with tier 8 shoulders helm. Now, what's different from the Alliance set is one is the Blade of Tarasque. Might be Tarasque, I'm not sure. Doesn't really matter. But this dagger can be contested because I'm pretty sure every Warlock wants it. Affliction and Demo Warlocks both want it. Whereas Misery's End is really just you and the Boomy and Ellie Shaman maybe. That's pretty much it. That's kind of free. So swapping to this is kind of contested. And then swapping to the Court of Biting Cold. Whereas the last belt, most of the casters wanted it. Court of Biting Cold, I believe mages and boomies want. So kind of depending how your rate is, if you have more mages than warlocks, this might be hard to get. But if you don't, if you have like 2 mages, which that's what our raid has, this might be easier for you to get. So it kind of just depends. And then also, again, using Petrified Ivy Sprig. Here we're using Boots of the Morning Widow. Now, this is something that's actually interesting. So I mentioned Court of Biting Cold. Something you can do here, let's actually save this set, is you can swap this back to Court of Tenebrous Mist, swap these to Footpads of the Icy Flow, and I'm pretty sure this should be comparable DPS. It's lower for sure, because when I was simming this, I know that the setup I had before, but this is 20 DPS less. So if it's easier, so if you think it's easier to get Court of the Tenebrous Mist, or if it's about the same as getting Court of Biting Cold, then again, these footpads are going to be extremely uncontested because nobody wants them in a BIS setup. This might be going to alts or some people in your raid who might not be on the progression team, or, you know, just kind of like leftovers. But if you can get this item, I would highly recommend it because I think it's going to be really good for making a set like this where you're not trying to get every contested item. You're still trying to get some. Like you still want the Cloak, you still want Wail of the Valkyr, you still want Reign of the Dead. But by making these swaps, only getting 2-piece tier 9, only going for these boots instead of Boots of the Morning Widow, that's basically 3 items that you no longer need the most contested version of. So that's just going to free up other things for you to prioritize, which I think just makes gearing this phase a lot easier. And as you can see, this is, of course, when I swap the boots, but let me actually go back to this real quick, just so you can see, when you swap, you barely lose any DPS. So this is what I would recommend. This is what I'm going to go for, the Alliance version of the set. Now, if you want to check these out below, kind of look at my sim settings, then feel free to. They'll be in the video description. But just wanted to put that out there because I think that this is a really good set to try to minimize the items that you're going for that are contested, even though, you know, most of them still are. But anyway, that's all for today. My name's Pantsface, and I'll see you in the next one.